Welcome to the One Priority Podcast, where our goal is starting and strengthening congregations to serve as vital and vibrant missional communities. The One Priority Podcast is sponsored and supported by the Columbia Metro Baptist Association and the almost 100 family churches that support the ministry of the CMBA. This week, I, Chris Reinolds and George Bullard, Executive Director of the CMBA, sit down with Craig Bailey, pastor at First Baptist Church of Winnsboro, to hear how they are continuing to build bridges in their community despite the struggles of the pandemic.
We're having this conversation with Craig because we want to talk to the source of ministry effectiveness in the town of Winnsboro, South Carolina. And so Craig Bailey came to mind. I mean, what can we say? But yes, recently we wrote our family story on the First Baptist Church Winnsboro and some of the ministry things that have been going on with them, particularly during the pandemic, and how the pandemic has caused them to shift, but how they are also trying to connect very deeply with their county. It's the county north of Richland, as everybody knows. It's a county of only about 22,000 people. It is not a growing county. It is a county with a lot of economic challenges, and it's a place that churches really have to target their ministry in order for it to touch the lives of people, because there still are many lost, unchurched, dechurched, and underchurched people there that need gospel ministry and people who need life ministry and support to come alongside. And so Craig Bailey and First Baptist Church Winnsboro are seeking to do a lot of good things in that area. And I'm super pleased to have my friend and our fellow minister, Craig Bailey, on this. Craig is the pastor of First Baptist Church Winnsboro, and he has served as a pastor. He's served in associational staff persons, and is a director of an association in Asheville, North Carolina, known as Buncombe Baptist Association, because that's Buncombe County there. And he has a great family and a wonderful wife, Sue. And so we're glad to have him as a part of our association. He's also the associate moderator of our association at this particular time, and serves on our visionary leadership community. So, Craig, I would pitch it to you and say, tell us a little bit about the community of Winnsboro and what's going on there at this time.
Well, Winnsboro has had its struggles, especially economically, with the shutting down of VC Sumner and closing Walmart and a few other disastrous things that have happened. But Winnsboro's trying to come back and struggling forward. We have a demographic that is like some other counties in South Carolina. About 2/3 of our population would be Black Americans. And so we have a significant Black population here. It just only seems natural that that would be one of our focuses of ministry. We also have a high poverty rate. Something like 86-87% of our public school students are considered in poverty. So we've got two big issues between poverty and our racial makeup that make it a little bit challenging for some of our typical churches.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from what we understand, you've been driving towards a greater racial unity for a few years now, multiple years now. When did this drive really become a point of emphasis for you personally? And sort of what steps had you taken at FBC Winnsboro to get there prior to COVID?
Well, the idea from my standpoint of racial reconciliation goes back a long way, even back to when I founded Perimeter Road Baptist Church in Valdosta, Georgia. Being near a military base, we strove to make it open to people of all backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so a couple of our very first members there were Black Americans,
right,
as well as then some who were from foreign cultures that had married into Air Force families. So we one of the first things I did down there was bring Babby Mason down for a concert, and had a couple of South Georgia pastors tell me I would get fired for doing that. And I said, "Really? You think so?" And no, it was great. So we've started this a long time ago as far as my ministry is concerned. Everywhere I've landed, I've tried to connect with some of the Black pastors in the community and build those relationships. That's one of the things we did here, but to put credit where it's due, a great foundation had already been laid because the previous pastor here, Mark Chapman, good friend of mine who's in our church now, had already started a relationship with St. Mark Baptist Church as a sister church relationship. And we were already doing some worship services together. So I didn't have to do much to get it started. I just had to jump on that bandwagon and keep moving it forward.
That's great. That's great. It's incredible to hear.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so what would you say, Craig, are some of the current challenges about racial reconciliation, racial ministry in Fairfield County this time, and how are you addressing them?
Probably our biggest challenge right now has been COVID,
Right.
because many of our Black churches are much more sensitive to the problems it brings. It seems to be a bigger issue in that community, a lot more dangerous. And so many of our sister churches here that have majority Black congregations have just really shut down and gone 100% virtual, if anything at all. And they are very slowly coming back. Just before COVID hit last year, I was actually scheduled to speak at a local Black Baptist church here in town during Holy Week. And that got canceled because of COVID. And that church has not had a service since.
Wow.
That's an in-person service, rather. So that's been kind of our biggest challenge, working around just this virus.
Right. Right. Well, it makes sense. On one of our last podcasts, we met with a group of guys that were kind of explaining about the various dynamics that do exist in the Black community as far as the concerns about COVID, and so addressing those things. And so they're absolutely valid issues that have to be overcome and dealt with there. But since COVID has happened, even as this period of struggle has been going on, there's been progress that you guys have been making up there at FBC Winnsboro. Can you tell us a little bit about the ministry towards community engagement, even since COVID?
Well, the best thing we started this during COVID, was our partnership which started with Midlands STEM Institute here, along with other of our public schools, where we started the Wednesday after school program. We bring some kids in, we send a bus to the STEM school and bring some in. Others can come if they can find transportation. And we just allow them some time to be in the gym, in the rec room, to sometimes have organized activities with them. Other times just let them have free time, feed them a meal when it's over, have a devotional time, sometimes a worship time, and bring those folks together. The racial makeup of our after school ministry is about like Winnsboro. And so it's given us the opportunity, as we meet those parents and interact with them, to really begin to build some of those relationships and talk with some of those parents whose churches are not perhaps having services right now, but I've been able to plug in with some of them. As you know, Chris, I've got an online devotional I do every morning. I call it Wake Up in the Word. And I've been able to connect with several of those families who watch my devotionals and comment on them and interact with me day in and day out because of it. So that's been, in some ways, COVID has opened a couple of doors there that I'm not sure would have been opened as easily if we had not had the problem. So it's amazing how God has used that in a positive way to help us build those relationships.
Craig, you mentioned the STEM school, and not a lot of people know what a STEM school is. Would you mind sharing about that very briefly? And also, one of the things I've always wondered about the STEM school in Winnsboro is it pretty well contextual to Fairfield? And so what is its influence in the county?
Well, the STEM Institute has been here for a while, and it has really struggled. This is a public school, of course, very much like a charter school. And this one is actually one of several that are sponsored through Erskine College. And it has provided an option for parents who want a stronger education for their children through science and technology and mathematics, things of those nature. It has about 200 students or so. Actually meets in the location for Rockton Baptist Church until they can get their own building. So we've been able, because of that, to build a strong relationship with the school through the community. We have some of our Baptist folks from not just my church, but a couple of others that work there. And so we've kind of made that a mission field for us, as well as the public schools here. Or should I say the more traditional public schools here.
Yeah, okay. Um, and another question that maybe is a little different than specifically the ministry question, that does relate to the context of Winnsboro. You know, everything that happens, like you're talking about the closing of the Walmart and the closing of the nuclear power plant attempts and all those kinds of things, affect the county. But we Baptists have one institution that has existed in Fairfield County for a good number of years, White Oak Conference Center, and how has its closing affected the Fairfield and Winnsboro community?
It hurts. Uh, a lot of people didn't realize how many jobs it provided on the side, as well as, of course, being in First Baptist for generations, for at least a generation, I should say, our teenagers, as well as some of our adults, all had jobs, either full-time or part-time, at White Oak. So the directors and people that work out there have a history of being members of our church. And so it's hurt us as a church, as well as, added to the financial woes, the economic woes of the county.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris?
Well, Craig, I'm just wondering also sort of the community engagement and all the things that you guys are doing and working in the community and seeking to bring a greater racial unity. What are some of the encouraging stories that you're seeing written during this time frame?
I really feel like many of our people in the churches are more community aware now. And our folks are being encouraged to be intentional about building those relationships across what have been normal barriers.
Yeah.
If you look at, I don't want to bring up all the issues, I'd like to just forget those, but the past of this area has some really bad stories about racial disharmony and just bad feelings and prejudice and just some bad history here. And a lot of the people remember that, and they don't remember it fondly, obviously. So it takes some intentionality with us to build those relationships. And you don't expect people to just immediately embrace you. They're suspicious. They have a lot of that past embedded in their psyche, and they just aren't really sure that you mean what you say until you follow through with it. When we've had folks out, like, of course, we've had Andre Rogers come speak at our church, as well as some others, to do something intentionally to kind of build those bridges. It's a step in the right direction, but we've learned to be content with the little steps of folks toward us instead of leaps. You just don't get those because we've got a lot of history to overcome. Let me just put it that way.
So interesting. So interesting. Well, Craig, I commend you, and I commend to people to go to our website at columbiametro.org and go to the section on our family stories and read the story entitled "One Ministry Plant Paused as Another Grows at FBC Winnsboro." That tells a little bit more about the story of some of the kinds of things that you all have been doing. But Craig, this is a personal thing before we conclude. And that is that recently you were involved with us, and you will be involved again in a conversation with a Rabbi Andy Meyerson, because as our vice moderator, you're concerned about the whole association and the Columbia Metro Baptist Association, what's going on, and but you are a friend of Andy's, and of course he's talking about the possibility of launching a Messianic Jewish congregation in our associational area. And I wonder if you'd give a word of personal testimony about Andy to us.
Glad to. Of course, I want Andy to be here, not so much for Winnsboro. We do not have, as far as I know, one Jewish person in Fairfield County. I take that back. There may be one I know about over toward Blythewood, but the fact is, Andy Meyerson has a tremendous gift. We were able to see that displayed for us in Buncombe Association around Asheville, as he was able to reach out to the Jewish community and present Christ as their Messiah, and also really help engage many Christians who wanted to know a little bit more about Jewish heritage, who wanted to learn Hebrew, for example, who wanted to get in on some of the things that would help them understand the feasts and the Old Testament a lot better. So he's just been an invaluable source of encouragement to us, both there and in the Spartanburg Baptist Network, where he even served as moderator. And for some of you may know, he also helps a congregation. He has one in Charleston. So God's already using Andy around our state, and I'm looking forward to him using him in the Columbia area as well.
Chris?
Well, Craig, thanks so much for being with us and joining with us for this conversation. And we appreciate everything that you're doing for the association and up there in FBC Winnsboro.
Thank you, Chris.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining with us. And please be sure to check out the show notes for more detailed information about today's show. Also, if you found this podcast helpful for you and your ministry, share it with others so we can get the word out about what God is doing. Until next time, from all of us, we thank you for listening and urge you to share this podcast with everyone you know. It's the good news about the good news in the Columbia Metro Baptist Association.